So what we try and do is unite a lot of disciplines together. We are working in the realm of art and public space and creative placemaking to make our cities more vibrant and exciting and playful. Where, of course, one of the things that is most important to us is the proliferation of renewable energy infrastructure. And an IRENA report out this week reminds us that we have to increase the rapid progress about 6 times the rate of growth that we're at right now if we're going to meet the Paris Accord. And so that is a kick in the butt for us all. And we need to provide renewable energy infrastructure wherever we can. And so we look at living buildings and expanding that to living cities, and we are looking at how to integrate all these things together and bring in teams of architects, artists, landscape architects, engineers, other creative scientists, collaborating together, which can spark true innovation. If you go back to the beginning of electrification, distributed energy resources and microgrids aren't new. That was how things all started. All of our power plants were located in the heart of our cities. And Austin's a great example, especially just thinking about the Seaholm power plant and the Holly power plant, which are being reimagined into new and exciting places for the city. These buildings are a legacy, an architectural legacy, because they were set in the places that we live and work, and as a consequence of that, they were designed by the architects of their time to reflect the normative aesthetics of the day and the styles of the day. As we were able to raise the voltage of transmission high enough to send electricity across far distances without too much loss, we got our power plants, some of them, out of the city. We didn't build new power plants in the hearts of our cities because they were mostly coal-fired, and they are around the places that we live and work. And you look at pre-EPA photos of our downtowns, and you know why we try to get them out. But as they left the city, they also lost the relationship to art and architecture. They became more pure utility, something to quickly drive by if you're on the highway. Oh, most people have no idea today where their electricity generally comes from, for the most part. Now, the renewable energy transition is upon us, and in some cases, that lack of a relationship between design, art and public space and architecture and landscape is continuing forward into a utilitarian aesthetic for renewable energy installations like the ones that you see on the screen here. And of course, to be clear, we are not against utilitarian renewable energy installations. The cheapest kilowatt hour is important, and we're excited by the progress that's being made where now a solar plus storage power plant can compete on the market with gas-fired peakers, which is really exciting and important. But there are some places where this kind of approach may not be the most valid, or there's an opportunity to have a higher bar and do something more creative and interesting, especially as these infrastructures don't pollute the air around and we can breathe next to them quite clearly, and so they can come back into the places that we work, live, and recreate. The land use impact of renewable energy infrastructure is quite important to consider. So this is an information graphic that we made at the beginning of when we founded the project back in 2009, and it shows the surface area required to power the world with solar alone. That's all forms of energy, transportation, heat, electricity. And all the little squares are apportioned around the globe in relation to the amount of consumption, but if you put them all together, in the bottom left you can see a 2030 projection that they're all about the size of Spain. So it's no small task. And at 2% of renewable energy infrastructure in the United States, we're already seeing a not in my backyard pushback against new energy installations that are coming into places where people have cherished view sheds and places, and they see these as something that is aesthetically not as welcome. And so we can be creative and tackle that problem. Buildings, of course, are a big part of the solution. 40% of energy is from buildings and the carbon footprint that we have. So living buildings are trying to tackle this, but it's a really high bar. It's a lot to ask of a building that has to do so many other things to also become its own power plant. And the impact on buildings and their design is now flowing into a sort of sustainable expressionism, which is great because they need to respond to the natural energies of the sites around them and create the electricity and the energy that they need, and sometimes even the water if that's possible. But there's a bit of a limit to that. Not every building can be a living building. Maybe it can be, it should be. But we can also think about the spaces between buildings, and that's really the landscape in which we're working in the Land Art Generator Initiative.
So it's with that background and that history that in 2008 actually, we found ourselves living in Dubai and inspired by the landscape and the ambitious endeavors happening in the UAE, we thought, well, what if we brought together creative interdisciplinary teams to tackle these issues? Very specifically, we were inviting artists and landscape architects and engineers and scientists to work together to develop large-scale public artworks that also generate clean energy at a utility scale. To start the project, we held an international design competition, open call, and free, open to anyone in the world, and since then have held 4 more. So we're now on our 5th biennial competition. We have over 800 ideas sitting in a portfolio representing over 60 countries. So really proud of the reach that the project has around the world. The design brief is quite complex and developed with project partners every step of the way, but this is a baseline. The artwork has to capture energy from nature and cleanly convert it into electricity. That's number 1. From there, everything grows. And we ask teams to design installations that are safe and places where people can recreate. So imagine a power plant where you can have a picnic also. So we were based in Dubai and therefore held our first competition in Dubai. 3 sites, 1 in Dubai and 2 in Abu Dhabi, and these were all urban gateways, and we can talk more about these sites if you're interested during Q&A, because since that time there's been interesting development on all of them. Masdar put us front and center at the 2011 World Future Energy Summit, which thrust us out into the energy sector immediately. We then followed up in 2012 at Fresh Kills Park, which many of you might know is a former landfill. Right now it's nearing the end of reclamation and will be a park 3 times the size of Central Park, so a terrific amenity for New Yorkers. 2014, we followed up at a brownfield site across from the Little Mermaid in Copenhagen. And in 2016, we were at a coastal site in Santa Monica, allowing our teams to utilize a wide range of technologies that we had not been able to in past competitions. This is just a snapshot to give you an idea of what is involved in a competition. So obviously, we have submissions. In this case, Copenhagen, over 300 submissions representing 50 countries, but also a wide range of workshops and lectures and exhibitions, publication, unique educational materials, dual language in this case. So the competition is really an opportunity to reach a broad public and representing all ages, all demographics, and really getting these messages out to the public. This year we are in Melbourne, Australia, just a couple weeks to go, so if there are any designers in the room, you have until May 6th to enter LOGGI 2018. And this is a really interesting and exciting site for us. It's in the city of Port Phillip, St. Kilda Triangle. So this is a suburb of Melbourne in the state of Victoria. And it's been an interesting master planning process they've gone through over the last few years. And now we enter that as a sort of overlay onto the master plan that exists. What we'd like to do is take you through a range of submissions organized by technology type, and then we'll take you through some of our other projects.
Yeah, so we're going to, what you see on the screen right now are some standard mono polycrystalline solar panels like you might put on your rooftop. Give them to a creative team, and you come up with Energy Duck. So everybody loves a duck, right? So why not have it power an entire neighborhood, which is what this artwork will do. And not all of the panels are oriented in the optimum solar incident angle for production, and that's really not the point. The point is that this is an artwork first. It just happens to pay back its carbon footprint and its construction cost over time through the production of kilowatt hours, and it will produce about 400 megawatt hours a year. It's also a battery, and it allows water to come into the belly of the duct, if you will, to create additional energy from microhydro turbines, and then release that water out and lift the duct back up. And so it's able to mitigate the duct curve for energy generation from solar energy.
If there's anyone in the audience that doesn't have isn't familiar with what 400 megawatt hours means, what you can do is drop a 0, and you're going to find an average amount of American homes that might be powered by an artwork. So in this case, 40 or so homes.
This is an approach that's a little bit more modular. So this team is proposing this futuristic solar module that can be built in a single or 10,000, which is what this team proposes on the mound in Fresh Kills Park for 2012. But you don't have to limit yourself to the blue and the black solar panels that we're all familiar with. There's so much happening every day in renewable energy technology, and so it's a really exciting time to be engaged in this. You can have a golden solar panel or a solar panel that's any color you could want, really. This is a polycrystalline tinted panel on the right. On the left is an image from Sylaxis showing a lamination technique that you can put a film over top, and we're going to show another type of process for that a little later in the presentation. But a solar panel can look like any other exterior panel on a building nowadays. It could be pure white, any color, or it could even have images on it. So this is one of the first submissions that ever came into our competition, so it has a place in our heart. Antonio Maca and Flavio Massi presented Solar Ecosystem, which is a new photovoltaic sun for the city of Abu Dhabi. And they used that golden tinted photovoltaic panel in a custom module to create this beautiful arabesque pattern. And it's a snapshot of the relative position of the planets on the day that the UAE was founded. So this is a young country with great pride, and what a better way to display their pride in their country than a beautiful work of art that celebrates that and also powers about 100 homes at the same time. Moving forward into organic photovoltaics and dye-sensitized solar cells, these offer an even greater opportunity for artists to use this as the media for their creative expression. They are flexible, and they're colorful, semi-translucent if you want to have it with a clear backer on both sides. And so you can imagine the sky is really the limit. All of the pink ribbon that you see in this artwork is actually the solar panel itself. This is a solar power plant where you would definitely want to come and take a picnic, and it would power at least as many homes as the number of people who would come and visit it during any given day.
We love to share this slide with youngsters as young as 4th or 5th grade and really show them the contrast between the earlier slides of power plants and engage them in a conversation of where would they like to be on a Sunday afternoon.
Solar thermal technology, going away from PV entirely, is absolutely something that can be incorporated into artwork. And it was the solar power towers that are being constructed now in Nevada and California, and were being constructed in Spain when we started the project and elsewhere, that really were one of the things that inspired us, because we looked at these desert landscapes with thousands of mirrors tracking the sun across the sky, focusing that energy into these light beams that you can see. And, you think, really, that wasn't designed by an artist? That's not a work of land art? But, it got us thinking about, well, what if we had a way to really have an intention behind these energy infrastructures that we're developing? This is a prototype from the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology that shows a beamed-down version where the field of mirrors tracking the sun focuses the energy onto another set of mirrors that beams a beam down to a collector at the ground, so you don't have to pump the heat transfer fluid to the top of the tower. And this is the exact same technology that was incorporated by Santiago Miras-Cortez in his proposal, the winning submission to the 2014 competition for Copenhagen. And it is an hourglass. You can see it has a top bulb and a bottom bulb, and it's there to remind us all that there's still time to avert the worst effects of climate change if we can all act together. And so it's an inspiring and positive message. At the same time, it powers 1,000 homes with solar energy. And you can imagine walking right up to that beam of light and placing your hand on the protective cylinder of glass so you don't burn it off, but really getting there and feeling that heat through the glass and viscerally having an understanding of how this technology works. And so this is an opportunity for people to engage in their energy and their energy production. And it's an opportunity to educate young people who would come to this place not necessarily because it's a power plant, but because it's a fun place to run around. Wind energy, too. So we're not just limited to solar. What you see on the screen now are ducted turbines, or compact acceleration wind turbines. They take advantage of the Venturi effect, which is if any fluid is condensed in its flow, it will accelerate. So you can take this shroud and accelerate the wind right before it hits the rotor. And so you can have an increase in wind energy production, but these have had a bit of a spotty history in the marketplace because you have to build the duct, which is more material, and it turns out you can just make the blades a little longer and make the same amount of energy. But it's a really good idea. And if you take it out of that context and put it into a work of art, now you have something. So this is Fresh Hills, a play on Fresh Kills. Second place entry to the 2012 competition. And Matthew Rosenberg and his team decided to graft the windrose diagram onto one of the mounds of the park and take advantage of that physics, the Venturi effect, and these massive landforms will capture the wind, condense it so it accelerates right before it hits turbines, and the larger of the landforms are oriented towards the prevailing wind direction. Another example of a shrouded wind turbine in a kinetic artwork here is Wind Nest. It was originally designed for a desert in Abu Dhabi for our 2010 competition, but a group of foundations in Pittsburgh had their eye on this project and developed it through schematic design for a new site in urban context. And so this is a great example of how even if you don't win the biennial competition, you may get a phone call from us in the future saying, hey, would you like to develop your idea for a different site, new context? Trevor Lee really jumped on that opportunity, and he's been a great collaborator. You can see the quarter-scale prototype of the artwork here. We were testing its yawing mechanism, how it moves to face the wind with this big wall of fans. And it's designed in its full scale to offset a little more than the energy required to power a carousel in the park. So beautiful kinetic artwork that people can really enjoy just for its pure beauty, and it also happens to be making the entire park net zero. Now comes some more interesting technology. So we put out a field guide to renewable energy technology, and it shows there's more than 50, maybe even 60 different ways that you can convert natural energy into electricity cleanly and renewably. Here we have piezoelectric stacked actuators as a material property that converts electricity, creates electricity through the pressure on this material. And on the right side, you have a linear alternator that can create electricity just from any back and forth kinetic movement. Both of those technologies are incorporated into Windstock, which is a wind farm without the blades. So if your problem with wind energy is the blades, which some people have the flicker, the birds, there's a lot of other problems that birds have that are more than wind turbines, so we won't go into that. But here you have an opportunity. This is a solution that has no blades. It's beautiful for a context outside the city in Abu Dhabi where this is located. You could imagine walking through this otherworldly landscape to experience this. And it has piezoelectric actuators along the stalk that create electricity from the bending and the pressure action as these stalks sway in the wind. The team is inspired by the way that if you watch a field of grass wave in relation to the wind, and they wanted to create that at a larger scale. And then below the surface of the ground, you have those linear alternators that are capturing that back and forth movement and turning that into electricity. The engineer on the team estimates that the amount of electricity per land area would be about the same as a large-scale three-blade horizontal axis wind farm, because you have to place those so far apart so that the disturbances of one doesn't affect the efficiency of the other downstream. wave energy technology is advancing how we relate to hydraulic generators, and this is a Wells turbine here. So it continues to rotate in the same direction no matter which way a fluid is flowing. And this is a technology that's been adapted for many different kinds of wave generating devices. And in Copenhagen, one of the teams decided that they really were excited by this technology, but Copenhagen is a pretty protected harbor, and there really are no waves, even on a windy day. So they decided to attach these beautiful flags to the top of those so that they could create that back and forth movement, taking advantage of the technology that's been developed by these wave energy conversion experiments, but put it in a new context with this artwork. Here you have a field of biomass energy, kind of reminiscent of Agni Denny's wheat field in Battery Park City. But here the idea is that it would be harvested periodically throughout the year. It would be interspersed with poppies to celebrate the Danish landscape. This is an entry to the 2014 competition for Copenhagen. And some portion of the harvested wheat would be used to create these architectural follies on site, but the majority of it would go to biomass or biofuel production. In 2016, it was really exciting for us because after 2014, where we had water but we had no waves, we were finally in the Pacific Ocean where there really are waves in Santa Monica Bay. So the teams were able to utilize renewable energy, wave energy devices as the medium for the creative expression. And this team decided to use this technology called CETO that's being tested off Australia. Very powerful wave energy converters, and they adapted them so that they can reflect on the history of the Santa Monica Pier as a yacht harbor in the early 20th century and create this fantastic playland for people. The pipe is one of our favorite submissions, and we've gotten some interests from other coastal cities around the world to develop this project recently. What's great about this is that it's a team of engineers out of Vancouver that have a proprietary desalination technology called electromagnetic filtration, and they can take direct DC power from solar and use that electricity to pull salts and other minerals out of water naturally without filters or reverse osmosis. So it requires less energy per unit of water produced. And what they did is they collaborated with an artist/architect and came up with the idea of putting this beautiful pool in the center of this artwork so that people can come out and they can bathe in this pool, which has a much higher salinity than the surrounding ocean, higher than the Dead Sea. So you can just sort of float there and relax, and maybe the water's good for your skin. I don't know. We'll find out. But what the really good part about this is that this amenity, this part of the technology, is also the slow release brine release mechanism, so that they're able to periodically disperse the waste brine and have it be placed into the bay in a way that doesn't have a spike in the salinity levels that is a negative impact on marine life. Here's another example of energy and water collaborating together for an artwork. You have in the clear orb an oscillating water column along that walkway that you see here that creates electricity to power pumps that then bring some of the water from the bay into a table where the water then evaporates and distills down as fresh drinking water around the side of this clear orb, and then trickles down and falls in this waterfall element that is also something that you can go out that walkway and see and witness. So just a really amazing way to engage people with their energy and their water infrastructure. So that's a really quick snapshot of just some of the amazing ideas that have come into our biennial competition. But we can only hold those once every 2 years. We're thinking of maybe going annual, but it's a lot of work. And so in the meantime, we get invitations from cities, developers, and others. And we sometimes the idea there, after our first conversations, comes out that they'd really like to celebrate local creative talent. And so oftentimes the process then suits a more invited competition model, a request for qualifications like Loggy Glasgow, where the city council came to us and paired us with a developer, that's developing a site called Port Dundas, just north of Centre City, Glasgow. It's at the terminus of the Glasgow Canal, and it used to be a distillery. It's a brownfield. It's pretty polluted. There's been no residential there, so people don't know this is a place, but it's going to be a regenerative project that's going to be mixed use. It's going to have hundreds of places for people to live, but how do you get people to this new place? So they want a really seminal work of public art, they want a public park in this project, and they want it to be seen from downtown, and they want that artwork to be able to contribute to the overall sustainability goals of the development. And the winning project, we're excited to say, will offset the needs of about 300 of the homes. So when you purchase into this development, you're going to be able to say that my house is powered by the artwork, and how cool is that?
We did a similar process for Willimantic, Connecticut, and the winners will be announced next week at Connecticut Arts Day, so stay tuned. These are the 3 submissions that came in through an invited RFQ process. And we want to show you this so you can see the pace with which we can often work. Last year at Connecticut Arts Day in March, we announced the partnerships and we held our first community workshop. It was at that workshop that community members decided that they wanted to hold an invited competition and very specifically invite Connecticut-based teams to the table. And then over the course of a year, we put out the RFQ, we did a range of community engagement sessions, and we announced the winner next week. So that's 1 year exactly from Connecticut Arts Day to Connecticut Arts Day. We work in a lot of other models too, though, outside of competitions. And this is an example with a group of women in Olorgesailie, Kenya, a group of Maasai who currently have no electricity in their village and have been working with a fashion designer, Taranay Mosley of Idiadega, who she's US-based but has been going back and forth doing a co-design process for clothing and jewelry. They asked her if she could help with some sort of solar electricity for their village, and she found us, and we went over a year ago for a workshop over the course of 2 weeks. And the women have helped to co-design some installations for their village. We are now helping to prototype those, and those are objects that will go out on the global market. Those proceeds will go back to them, so they'll have some of the outcomes powering their village, but at the same time, the proceeds will be coming back to their village. Solar mural artworks are a hot new project we're working on, and this is just not too far from you. Our first solar mural in San Antonio, it was launched last fall at the Luminaria Festival, and it will find its permanent home at Epicenter in San Antonio. This is a project where we're working with a company out of New York. They actually were an MIT startup and are now based in New York City. They're developing this film that goes on top of the solar panel. There is a slight efficiency loss, about 2%, but we think it's a pretty terrific trade-off when you think of what you're getting visually on that solar panel. The company was developing this so that panels can blend into the rooftop, and we reached out to them asking if they felt it could be applied to an artwork. And this was the first outcome, and certainly if you want to know more about this, we can talk more about it in the Q&A. We're working on our second solar mural in San Antonio. Just a couple of days ago, we held a workshop on Friday with 75 fifth graders at Brackenridge Elementary School, science students, and then followed up the next day with community elders. There's a project on the west side called the Photo Historia or Photo Banner Project, and these are historic photographs that are banners along the sidewalk and around the community. And they are interested, Esperanza Center for Peace and Justice is interested in lighting up these banners at night. So why not do that through solar electricity? And one of these photos will be translated onto the solar mural, placed on the school, and then feed into a lighting system that we'll help put in place. Continuing our work with young people, we held a 2015 art camp in Pittsburgh, in the Homewood neighborhood of Pittsburgh. Over the course of 6 weeks, we took a group of around 18 students, age 8 to 17, so dramatic age range. We took them on field trips. We took them to a coal-fired plant, a nuclear plant, and then we offset that with a series of sustainable installations around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What we really wanted was for them to understand the energy makeup of their community and their region. We then gave them lessons in energy science and art outside of the gallery and design process, much, much more. And they designed and then helped to build a solar sculpture that is now feeding into a community center, which in the top right, you can see in the corner of the community center where this is installed.
They're so proud of this result, and it's a really great example of how engaging people in the design of their own energy infrastructure can really accomplish a lot more than just the power production itself. So this is not fenced off like a community solar project might typically be. Instead, it's a celebrated work of art. It hasn't been vandalized because everybody in the community knows that the kids made this, and it's actually the first 3D sculpture in their neighborhood, they're proud to say. So it's a really great outcome.
And all of these projects where we're working with community really bring together community narrative and storytelling, along with all of the STEAM programming, science, technology, engineering, art, and math programming. So it's quite robust, but we think at the heart of it is the storytelling and the opportunity for all ages to understand that they can have some control of their energy landscapes. And then a wide range of educational materials that are all available for free as PDF downloads on our website. The only exception are the publications, which are our publisher handles distribution of those. But everything else you'll find on our website. We're making some card game right now that will be uploaded in October, and there are always printed iterations also. So if any of you are interested in the card game, find us and we'll put your name down and mail you a set of those in October.
It's going to be much more interesting than Uno.
We think. And the field guide is one of our more popular, and we would encourage you to download that. We were really thrilled to see that in the first 3 months of putting it up in January of 2012, that it was downloaded over 50,000 times. So we got a sense that there's a real hunger for this information, and it's written in a way that all ages from high school up can really understand, and different education levels can understand how it's written. We, in 2015, held a youth competition alongside our professional competition for Santa Monica. So it was on the other side of the Santa Monica Pier. And to go along with this competition, we put together a 13-step toolkit so that teachers and students wouldn't feel alone with the design brief and the design guidelines. With that 13-step toolkit, there were a series of presentations that educators could use. So every step of the way, we like to handhold educators and students so they don't feel abandoned with this information. We also Skyped in and conference called into classrooms around the world during this process. And for us, it gave us a great snapshot of what high school students are doing around the world. And we know that some of those high school students graduated and are entering Logi 2018. So that's a real success story for us.
It was great to see different departments within high schools collaborating together. You had the English and the science and the arts all coming together with the same students to collaborate on their youth prize entry on 2016.
And that said, for our professional competition, we do get a lot of university participation, and that was never our intention, but we're delighted that it is something that happens. Maybe 25-35% of our participation comes from senior studio coursework, and some of our best work actually comes from those students. In 2012, keeping in mind that the selection process, jury process, is 100% anonymous, we were shocked and thrilled to see that first and third place winners in 2012 came out of the same studio at Georgia Tech. So that teacher took the design brief very seriously and had studio sessions outside of class time that students came to and really approached it in an interdisciplinary way. We have a lot of faculty who come back every 2 years to use our design brief. And we're going to stop on this slide. This is not a land art generator artwork, although we really love this artwork. This is by Olafur Eliasson. New York City Waterfalls was up in New York City for the duration of 4 months and was on the high end of the cost of public art, $15.5 million. That would be about the same cost of the solar hourglass. But over those 4 months, it's estimated to have brought in $53 million in incremental spending. So certainly most people in this room, you're here because you understand the power of public art and the economic benefit of public art. But you know what we're encouraging is, along with the enthusiasm and all of the engagement that public art can bring forth, you know, why not have it generating real megawatt hours of clean electricity for a city and being an educational amenity and changing the way a community thinks about their energy landscape?
And on the bigger scale, bigger picture, it's an opportunity at this important time in human history when we are tackling the issue of climate together and we are engaged in this great energy transition to create new monuments for future generations to be able to visit and see how the cultural reflection of that time it shows itself in this new wonderful infrastructure. We think back on the Hoover Dam, which we visited recently, and thousands of people visit every day, not because it's a hydroelectric power plant necessarily, but because they want to see these beautiful works of Art Deco art set within this incredible landscape. And so that same opportunity exists today if we were able to, with this massive investment that we should be making in renewable energy, have 1% for the arts for energy and engage creatives in the process of the design of these places, as the WPA did in the early part of the 20th century, then we can really do something wonderful at the same time as we tackle this big problem. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you, Imagine Austin, and thank you to all of the institutions that made tonight possible. And we'd like to invite Lucia back up to the stage, or back onto the stage, and let's have a conversation.